a lot of new information in terms of the details. We have known that 14 people were killed. Tonight we learned that 12 of them were county employees. We have known now that 21 were injured. 18 of those were county employees. They set the scene inside that room for the first time. That 91 people were invited, 75 to 80 present when the gunmen showed up. It was a Department of Public Health event. They were starting out with business in the morning, transitioning to a Christmas party. There was a Christmas tree inside the room. Christmas trees on all the tables. They were trying to have a celebration of Christmas. Instead, 23 days before Christmas, 14 of them would die. The police officer you just heard from at the end, Lieutenant Mike Madden, who was the first responder, talked about how they trained for this, but they could never imagine what actually happened. They're trained to experience sensory overload, but it was that and more. He said it was immediately evident upon arriving at the scene that the reports they had been hearing of an active shooting situation were true. Victims who were obviously dead outside the conference room. The situation inside the conference room, he said, was surreal. Talking about the smell of gunpowder, the fire alarms going off, the sprinklers going off, the people wailing in pain who were suffering, those down the hall who were terrified, not knowing what was happening or whether there were more shooters, and his effort to coax them to come to the police, and how it took the courage of one person to actually come forward, and then that opened the floodgates of the people who knew these police would protect them. And protect them they did. You heard the bit at the end. There was no manifesto found on site. There had been a question about that. And we're looking at video on screen right of the police escorting people out of the building. Have you seen this tape yet? You hear what the cop says?
Thank you. Thank you. Try to relax, everyone. Try to relax. I'll take a bullet before you do. That's for damn sure. Just be cool, okay?
Relax. I'll take a bullet before you do. That's for damn sure, okay? Tonight we've learned the identities of the 14 people murdered by their coworker and his wife during the Christmas party. The youngest victim, 26 years old. The oldest, 60. Police have also revealed that this crime was anything but spontaneous, saying the killers had a huge assortment of weapons and a virtual bomb factory at their home. Still, we don't know whether it was terror. Police say this evil husband and wife couple fired off some 75 rounds at their victims inside of the Christmas party conference room. They left 3 rigged together pipe bombs at the party with a remote-controlled detonating device that apparently malfunctioned. They fired another 76 rounds at the cops during a fierce gun battle. They had more than 1,600 rounds of unused ammunition in their rented SUV when police killed them. Meantime, at a family home, police found 12 pipe bombs, tools for making more, and an additional 3,000 rounds of ammunition. All of this, combined with their use of tactical gear, makes it clear this couple was ready to kill, and the carnage could have been much worse. In moments tonight, we will be joined by Dr. Sebastian Gorka, who provides counterterrorism training to the FBI, and by former Islamic extremist Majid Niwaz. But we begin tonight with Trace Gallagher reporting from San Bernardino, California. Trace?
And Megan, now the police have confirmed to the Associated Press that Saeed Farouk was in fact watching ISIS propaganda online and was in fact in contact with people the FBI had under investigation for terrorism. The next step is for them to find out exactly how deep these contacts were. Were these people, these groups, involved in any type of planning? The FBI has long said this was a very well-planned event. The question now is, was there any outside planning? Did these suspects have any training? Were they getting any funding? And those answers might come in some of the evidence that was taken out of the home of the killers over the past 24 hours. We have seen all kinds of electronic equipment coming out. We're talking about computers and cell phones, and experts say that would give police some type of idea of exactly when these conversations were going on, how long they were going on, and maybe how long the planning stage might have lasted. Because the firepower you just just listed, Megan, was so extensive, police were actually concerned, or at least convinced, that this might not have been the original target, that the Christmas party wasn't the original target, and that somehow the killers got off track and they were planning for a much bigger attack, and they certainly had the firepower to do so. But we have also learned that in the weeks before this attack, there was a confrontation between Saeed Farouk and one of his co-workers. The co-worker was deeply devout Christian, and there was an argument between them that got very heated, says the co-worker's wife, about Islam, about whether Islam was a peaceful religion. That co-worker was among the 14 who were shot and killed. I just want to, for the viewers who missed that amazing press conference at the top of the hour, Megan, it started right before the Kelly File went on the air, and for those who didn't see it, Lieutenant Mike Madden, he grew up here in San Bernardino. He's not even a street cop anymore. He's an administrative cop. He was on his way to lunch when he got the call, and he said he had to go in, and he said it really summed it up, saying that, look, these people were celebrating Christmas, and the next thing you know, they were dealing with death. I'm not sure if we have the soundbite, but we have Mike Madden. I want you to hear what he said right at the top of the news conference. Listen to this.
I'll tell you that it was something that, although we trained for it, it's something that you're never actually prepared for. It was unspeakable, the carnage that we were seeing, the number of people who were injured and unfortunately already dead, and the pure panic on the face of those individuals that were still in need and needing to be safe.
And in every tragedy there is irony. There were 14 people who were killed, Megan. 6 of them were women, 8 were men. One of the men was the father of 6. One of the women had escaped as a child Islamic extremism in Iran. And finally, we should note that police are very interested in this trip that Saeed Farouk took to Saudi Arabia in the early spring. Megan.
We are learning a lot more about him today as well. Trace, thank you. The trip to Saudi Arabia, the trip to Pakistan. He was apparently born to 2 Pakistani parents, as was his wife. And the wife is a whole story unto herself. We'll get to her in a minute. The FBI has now taken over this investigation, and my next guest just happened to have been with the FBI in Los Angeles while this attack was unfolding. Dr. Sebastian Gorka provides counterterrorism training to the FBI and Special Forces. He serves as the Major General Matthew C. Horner Distinguished Chair of Military Theory at Marine Corps University. He has a fascinating website as well, thegorkabriefing.com. In short, Dr. Gorka is the real thing. Doctor, thank you for being here. You were on the program 10 days ago saying we're on our own, that it's going to happen. And today, as we sit at 9:16 p.m. Eastern Time, we are still being told it might not be terror. It might not be.
I think that discussion is over. If the report that your colleague just gave us, that there is confirmation not only that this individual was accessing ISIS jihadi propaganda, but also was in contact with individuals who had previously been investigated for connections to jihadi groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda. I think that train has left the station. You heard the lieutenant himself, the first officer on the scene, say unequivocally, this was not a rogue incident. This isn't a question of somebody who had, an individual grievance with a colleague or who had some kind of psychotic break. Everything we are hearing reinforces that this was a well-prepared plan by people who have an ideological commitment to holy war, to jihad in the name of Allah, and that's what they did yesterday in that government building.
We still like to believe that the FBI would be on to somebody like this, somebody who is communicating with suspected extremists, somebody who is building bombs in his apartment, in his house, many of them, somebody who is arming himself to the gills, along with his wife, who he just picked up over in Saudi Arabia, came back and married her. And we want to believe that, people like you are monitoring these people and will know whether they're getting ready to do something like this. But it's not true.
Well, look, the fact is I work very closely with the FBI. I've worked closely with the NYPD. These organizations are doing incredible work. Look at the fact that in the last 20 months, we have killed or arrested 82 ISIS suspects, ISIS supporters on U.S. soil. That is through the amazing work of our federal, state, and local law enforcement and our intelligence community. But it is very, very challenging. The report that I mentioned previously that my company has just published on ISIS, the domestic threat, which your watchers, your viewers can access at threatknowledge.org. We have examples there of an ISIS ideologue who is here in the United States, who was pumping out the kind of material that apparently this mass murderer was consuming. And that individual had 48,000 followers on his social media site. So we've done a great job at intercepting and stopping those people who want to do jihad here in America. But who knows how many more there are? That's the real question, and it is fundamentally a human challenge, human intelligence challenge.
And what is being done to encourage the development of that intelligence by this administration?
What is being done to stop it? That's the better question. You've had your own experience in New York with Mayor de Blasio shutting down some of the most incredibly powerful intelligence initiatives of the NYPD. And over the last 7 years, we've seen this actually at the federal level. We've had the attempt by the administration to excise, to censor training and the materials used to prepare our operators. For example, the word jihad should not be used, should be deleted from PowerPoint slides, from materials used for training, because it could be deemed inflammatory to Muslims. This is where you see politics getting into the intelligence cycle, where you see censorship distorting the national security function. And I talk to these people, I talk to our operators, and they are angry. They know that this will endanger Americans if you allow political correctness into our national security mission.
And that is where we pick it up with our next guest. Doctor, thank you.
Thank you, Megan.
Well, the things that relatives and neighbors are saying about this suspect Farouk seem to paint a very contradictory picture. His father said he was, quote, very religious. And a neighbor told reporters that about 2 years ago, he became more devout, growing a beard and wearing religious clothing. Others say he seemed normal, quiet, and was living the American dream. And our next guest, who was once an extremist himself, says that's exactly the problem, and that the signs of someone going down the path of an Islamic radical may not be as obvious as you think. Majid Niwaz is a former Islamic extremist and author of Radical: My Journey Out of Islamist Extremism. Majid, thank you very much for being here. What we like to think we would know if we worked next in the county, for the county, and we work next to somebody who is becoming radicalized, but we might not know.
Actually, most times, Megan, we don't know, and that's the sad state of affairs. It's unfortunate. I mean, what we just heard from policeman Mike Madden was nothing short of heartbreaking, and those first responders deserve medals. The survivors of this atrocity deserve all the condolences and respect. But we can never predict this. And one of the reasons, if we look back, we have the evidence to indicate exactly from past terrorist attacks what exactly happens here. If you look at the 9/11 attackers, many of their passports were found in strip clubs and bars. If you look at the Tsarnaev brothers and the Boston Marathon bombers, you find that it was very difficult to predict that these were becoming Islamist theocrats and terrorists. And if you look in just even to this month, if you look to the Paris attacks, evidence indicates that some of the attackers owned bars and were for all thoughts and purposes, fully integrated
So the
in
question
French
is what people are
society.
supposed to do, because we heard a report from one neighbor. She saw some suspicious behavior. She didn't want to report them because she didn't want to seem like a racial profiler.
Yeah, and actually the evidence points to the fact that those who join terrorist organizations will invariably try to conceal any ostensible sign of religious devotion precisely so they are not detected. So if we're going to look to profiling, I think that ethnic profiling and profiling for overt signs of religiosity will actually miss the target, as it has done so in this instance, if the evidence indicates this was indeed a jihadist attack. I think what we need to start looking at is psychological factors. We need to start looking at ideas that are adopted and behavior. Now, those sorts of ideas we are familiar with. You know, anyone who starts saying things such as it's a duty, it's incumbent upon Muslims to resurrect this so-called theocratic caliphate, or somehow there's a global war going on against Islam and Muslims, or somehow democracy is antithesis to Islam. These are the sorts of ideas that radicals begin to adopt. And if they begin speaking in this way, I'd say to you, Megan, even if they're drinking alcohol and eating pork, but they're speaking in this way, they are surer signs for radicalization than overt signs of religiosity, which will be considered